Good morning, everyone. Today is the last seminar of ARESWA for semester 2 of 2023. We have one PhD research proposal seminar by Agus Ariutama. Agus is first-year PhD candidate at the School of Agriculture and Environment in the Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics. Thank you, Agus.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tafes, for the introduction. Okay, on this occasion, I would like to present my research project with the title Household Solid Waste Behavior and Practices, a Case of Indonesia. This research project is supervised by Associate Professor Ramtandit and Ben White. Okay, I respectfully acknowledge traditional custodians of Noongar land on which we are meeting today, and the Noongar people, and pay my respects to the elders past and present. Okay, these research presentations will be divided into 4 parts. The first is background. Second, I will explain about study 1, study 2, and study 3. Okay, you can see those 2 pictures. So this research topics is related personally to my experience. You can see from the first picture, we can see that there are solid waste being burned. And you can see the wall. This is the back of my house. And then this one on the right is the front side of my house. So for your information, my house is located only 20 kilometers from the capital city of Indonesia, Jakarta. It means that the unsustainable solid waste management in Indonesia is not only located in the village, but it's also in the city level. Okay, now let's continue with the first part, the background. The increasing number of solid waste has become global concern, especially due to the potential negative effects on environment and human health if the solid waste is not managed well. Then in 2012, about 1.3 billion tons of solid waste, or around 1.2 kilograms per capita per day, was generated. And then it is expected to increase to 1.3 kilometers per capita per day in 2025. And the people suffer most will be the people from developing countries or low and middle income countries. Why? Because people in low and middle income countries usually practice unsustainable solid waste management. They burn the waste, they throw openly on the inhabited lands or inhabited areas, etc. And one of the countries is Indonesia. In Indonesian case, in 2017, Indonesia generated 65.79 million tons of municipal solid waste. And based on the population projection, it is expected that the waste generation will be increased around 8%. Okay, the figure explain about the percentage of household in Indonesia based on the most frequently handled waste. On the left side, it's the unsustainable practice. You can see that the main household waste disposal is open burning, comprises 53%, followed by throwing the waste to the river or to the beach, and etc. On the right side is the managed one. You can see that the majority of the solid waste is picking up by cleaners, whether it is conducted by public or private organizations, and then followed by dumping the waste in temporary landfills. How about the waste separation, waste reduction practices in Indonesia? You can see that it only accounts for 1.1%. It means that the majority of Indonesians dispose the waste in unsustainable way. That's why solid waste management continues to be a huge challenge in Indonesia. Why? Because the rate of the increase of solid waste management infrastructure cannot keep up with the increasing number of waste generation. And those the unhandled waste pollutes Indonesian land, rivers, and oceans. Okay, now let's continue with the waste composition and waste source. You can see that the majority of the waste is organic waste or food waste, followed by plastic waste, timber waste, and paper. So data from 2018. And then who generates most waste? You can see that it is household. Counts for 42.51%. So from these figures, we can see that the household is the main waste generator. And in order to deal with managing solid waste, then the government should pay more attention to the household. That's why in the study, we focus our researches on the household waste, especially on the organic and plastic waste.
Sorry, can you explain more about the organic food? Like people didn't finish the meal and or they just buy the food or didn't cook it?
Okay, so later I will explain in the study one.
Okay.
So the definition of food waste. Okay, now let's start with the food waste. You can see that this is the stages of the food production to food consumption. So related to the food loss and waste generation in Indonesia, we can see that the consumption stage dominates the number of the number of food loss and waste. We can see that in 39% of the solid waste is in the consumption stage, and then it increases to 55% in 2019. And Indonesia in 2019 is categorized as number 2 food loss and waste producers in the world. Now the plastic waste, again Indonesia number 2 after China in terms of plastic polluter. So the increasing consumption followed by development of manufacturing and service sectors in Indonesia are 2 factors that influence the increasing use of plastic, and which will also increase the plastic waste generation because of we use plastic because of first it's cheap, second it's light, the third one it's easy to use, and the last one is resistant to corrosion and to water. And then the commonly encountered plastic waste. So according to Greenpeace study in 2019, so Greenpeace conducted cleaning in several provinces in Indonesia, and instant noodles package is one of the most encountered plastic waste in Indonesia. And we can see that instant noodles is a convenient food. It only takes 5 to 10 minutes to eat the instant noodles. And of course, it has gained popularity. And the potential of the instant noodles packages, Indonesia ranks among the top 2 countries globally for instant noodle consumption. Okay, related to solid waste management, Indonesia attempts to achieve SDGs target number 12.5, which substantially reduce waste generations by enacting Presidential Decree number 97 year 2017, which regulates policies and strategies on management of household waste and household type waste by setting the target 30% waste reduction and 70% waste handling. You can see that from the previous figure, the waste handling only accounts for 46, I think. So the government attempts to increase the waste handling into 70% by 2025. However, the problem is significant underfund related to waste management. Local governments in Indonesia only spend $5 to $6 per capita per year for the solid waste management. Whereas related to international standard by World Bank, countries should spend or should allocate 15 to 20 US dollars per capita per year for the, let's say, normal solid waste management. And then next one, there's a limited evidence of effective policies aimed at addressing household solid waste issues. So the focus of the Indonesian government is on the solid waste infrastructure without really paying attention on the household. Okay, because of those background, there are gaps in literature. The first is limited studies, policies, and empirical evidence in measuring food waste at household level. The second one, there's also limited evidence to understand the way the household actually make waste decisions, given economic and commensality factors. And based on the gaps in the literature, the studies that will be conducted have the importance. One, it can be used to understand the direct relationship between household food waste and household specific characteristic in the developing country context. The second one can be utilized to generalize a wide range of household groups. And then the last one, identify household decision to waste vary with factors such as price, location, cost of replacement, future eating plan, and commensality. Okay, the study one title is Measuring Household Food Waste and Inefficiencies, a case of Indonesia. The objective is to measure household food waste as input inefficiency in production setting and its determinants in Indonesia. With the research question, how is the household level food waste empirically identified as input inefficiency in a production context? The methods implemented in the study will be production frontier model adopted from a UN Genica study. So basically, this study will empirically identify food input, excess food input as input inefficiency in a production process. The data used is first National Social Economic Survey, or SUSENAS, specifically module food acquisition and expenditure, and risk survey, basic health research, with around 250,000 samples. The data required are first household demographic variables, the second one biological measures of each household member, the third one detailed data of food acquisition, whether food and beverages and also ingredients. So food waste here refers to excess food inputs used to produce current level of output in the form of energy expenditure. So intuitively, the study formulate the household food consumption as a production process that converts food inputs into chemical energy that can be used as humans' body metabolic process and physical activities. So here, we use the input inefficiency as a consequence of uneaten food, taking into account heterogeneous wasting behaviors of the household. So basically, the uneaten food indirectly measured function as the operational definitions of household food waste. Okay, again, related to definitions, we use the US Department of Agriculture's Economic Research Services and UA fusions, and also FAO, which food diverted or recovered for non-food purposes is equals to food waste. For compost and etc., we categorize as food waste. And then we only use the edible parts of food as inputs in the estimation to indicate the avoidable waste. So kind of like potato skins, we don't put that in the study. We only use the edible parts. And then for the equations, household age production process is assumed to take part in the form of equation. Output Y as a function of summation of the household members' biological measures and physical activities pH equals to production technology, which is a function of food input XH, and household demographic factors DH. Does my explanation answer your questions about food waste?
Yes.
So it's a food diverted only for not for food,
Yeah.
considered as food waste, and we only consider the eatable. The non-eatable, we did not put it in the model. Okay, for study 2, understanding household food waste decisions, a case study in Indonesia. So the objective is identify the household decision to waste food and systematically determine how decisions to waste food vary with several attributes. With the research questions, what factors affecting the likelihood and rank of wasting food in Indonesia? The methods applied here is vignette approach with 5 attributes. The first, location, cost per person, amount of food leftovers, commensality, and future meal plans. And each varied at 2 levels. For example, like location, home or restaurant. Future meal plans, they have plans or not, something like that. And the model we use ordered logic regressions with the participants 1,400. For the design, the first between subject design, because we have 8 scenarios. For each scenario, we require 150 with the power 0.8. So for the between subject design, the participants is 1,200. And for the within subject design, we need 200 participants. So for between subject design, respondents are randomly assigned different version of the same basic vignette. So each respondent has the same probability to get 1 to 8 scenario. And then the responses will 5-point scale. 1 is definitely save the food. 5 definitely throw out. And then for the within subject design, respondents are presented with multiple vignette scenarios, and they are asked to rank scenarios from number 1, most likely to save scenario, to number 8, definitely throw out the food waste or the leftover. This is the example of a vignette scenario. Let's say imagine you had just finished eating dinner at home or out of a restaurant. You have dinner alone or with others. The meal costs about, so in Indonesia, 22 Australian dollars is categorized as normal price, whereas 15 Australian dollar is expensive per person, per each person. And then you are full, but there is still food left on the table, enough for a whole or a half lunch for tomorrow. And then assuming you don't or you already have meals planned for lunch and dinner tomorrow, what would you do? Throw or save? Okay, the next related to plastic waste. So there are limited empirical studies to understand and measure mismanaged plastic waste in Indonesia, especially at a household level, and also related to instant noodle packaging and its determinant in Indonesia. The significance, identify how households manage their plastic waste, and try to identify how household waste disposal on instant noodle package vary with the socio-economic condition and knowledge related to waste behavior. The title of the study 3 is Mismanaged Plastic Waste from Instant Noodle Package in Developing Countries, case of Indonesia. Again, the objective is quantify the household's instant noodle packaging waste and the disposal behaviors and examine the factors affecting the mismanaged disposal behavior of plastic waste. And the research question will be, what are the determinants of uncontained instant noodles packaging waste? The data, again, we use secondary data from National Social Economic Survey, especially from food acquisition and consumption, and also a social resiliency module in 2017. The number of respondents is around 75,000 observations. The methodology we use is ordinary least squares estimation. And this is the equations. So basically, respondent in the survey reported food and beverage purchases in this study is instant noodles in the preceding 7 days, along with their main means of solid waste disposal. Then, after we capture each household's consumption on instant noodles, we will measure the determinants of mismanaged plastic waste from instant noodle package with this equation. And the independent variables, quite a lot. Settlement area, whether they live in city or rural area, relationship status, single, married, education of household head, household size, ownership status of the house, environmental knowledge, and then the act of bringing reusable shopping bag, involvement in environmental activities in a residential circumstance, and source of environmental knowledge. Okay, that's all my presentation. Thank you very much.
Could you go back to study 1? I was trying to understand the equations. So this is a production function, and the definition of output is based upon
Household members.
So how do I read this? Okay, the right-hand side. The thing on the left is a function of
Production technology on the right side.
Yeah, and it's the inputs that have gone in, the amount of food I've bought and what home to be in my bag, and my demographics, which are things like income.
Yes, household demographic is kind of like dietary habit. So the more healthy.
Well, what's on the left-hand side? Is that a measure of output?
Yes, measure of output.
What is that output?
It's my weight, my height.
So BMR, basal metabolic rate, and physical activities.
So is this just basically a measure of the predicted amount of energy that I should need for a certain person who's like me?
Yes. So actually, we measure the input inefficiency based on input inefficiency as uneaten food.
But I haven't got any measure of uneaten food in there. I've got a measure of how much energy I ought to be using because of who I am and what I look like.
Yes.
And then you've got the inputs coming the other side, which is the amount of food I brought into the house.
Yes.
And presumably you're going to say, I'm relatively thin and whatever, old, don't need much energy. I'm bringing loads of food into the house. Therefore, I must be inefficient in this. I must be throwing a lot of it away. Because, well,
you're gaining a lot of weight.
Well, but is the energy in weight or calories? But I don't run myself on a least cost energy diet. So I don't, my objective isn't, when I buy food, it's not to say I'm going to achieve the diet that's going to keep me alive at least cost, and I'm going to choose the energy package that I have a more interesting life than that.
Yes.
So I'm just interested as to whether this actually, how this works. Because it doesn't look like, I understand the problem, but I'm wondering whether you actually are measuring my food waste. Because I think I could be throwing away very little, but be looking very inefficient to you because I'm being imaginative or something. But you're going to say this about energy, aren't you?
So
There's no cost in there, is that right? There's no economic cost of the food?
no,
It's
just
physical
the in the form of energy, calories. So let's say I buy 1,000 a food amount of 1,000 calories. I only require 700. So the 300 is the food waste. Because
how does your equation know that you only need 700?
because of the household demographic factors. So in this model, I try to use three. The first, income. The more income you have, the more food waste. based on the literature. Second one, healthy dietary habit. The healthier your dietary habit, the more food waste you produce. The third one, food security. The more secure your food, the more waste you produce.
Are they on the left-hand side or the right-hand side?
The right-hand side. The age.
So is this a production function with an inefficiency term in the way you would think about a agricultural production function, and that what you're going to measure is the determinants? You're going to measure inefficiency being below the frontier, and then things like income or whatever you're going to use to explain we have these wealthy and therefore they are inefficient people and they're just beneath, they're coming beneath the frontier.
It's not a tradition. It's not what I think of as an agricultural production frontier, because we're usually trying to maximise output for a set of inputs. Well, that's not the case here, is it?
But if you're just measuring a production function, if I'm just estimating the production technology, which I think this is doing.
Are you trying to measure excess food consumption against a frontier which shows how the minimum that someone would need?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So that means you have to have a way of defining that minimum, right?
Yes.
How do you do that?
So the minimum food requirement is based on the BMR, so household members biological measure. So in order to do everyday activities, we need the energy, which is calculated based on the.
So you've actually there'll be a formula in your system that calculates an energy requirement for an individual.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. And also physical activities. So.
And from that, you'll know how much more they bought than that.
Yes.
And you'll interpret that as waste.
Yes. So input inefficiency, because we buy more than required related to chemical energy. That's why in the definition we use avoidable and also.
So why do you need a DEA for that? If you're doing that calculation, that tells you how much is being wasted, you're interpreting it as waste. That's a result, right? That's an output.
Yes.
What does the DEA give you beyond that?
So based on the literature that I read, there's a kind of, how to say, econometrics, something like that. So DEA is non-parametric, right? Whereas stochastic production frontier is parametric. So we have the kind of normal distribution assumption or something like that. We use maximum likelihood estimation to estimate this.
Why don't you flip it over? I'm almost in a sense you should flip this over the other way, because the behavioural thing I can control is my purchases, which you've currently got on the right-hand side. And you sort of want to think that I want to explain, and presumably one of the things that explains how much I buy is my BMR, as in my aggregate efficiency need. So that should explain how much food I'm buying, and then there's going to be some additional stuff coming on top, which I'm buying, which I don't really need, because I just like being able to throw away half of my bananas. I just eat them up. So it just seems that it's almost as the causality shows the other. I don't know. Okay, this is very interesting, as you can tell.
But you can also tell that we're struggling to understand what it's really doing and whether it's the right tool for the job.
Yeah, I spend, let's say, more than a month to understand the journals. Even I read also the commentary, send message, email to the authors, trying to capture the idea behind. So it's kind of interesting.
So it's a paper in the American Journal which is trying to address this issue, that we observe food consumption, but we can only infer something about food waste. So this is, I think this is like in the first attempt. It might be measuring sort of potential waste of food, because you know, the excess energy, which I think my understanding of it, excess energy is either going into, well, it's going somewhere. You know, it's going, if you're not burning it off by being a bricklayer, it's going into waste, or it's going into you becoming, you know, you putting on weight, I guess. But, so
I'm still, so I understand that. I'm still puzzling about the DEA though. Like, so normally with the DEA, I'm no expert in this, but my understanding is that you determine inefficiency by the distance of an individual from the frontier. But you've described a process where you determine inefficiency with a separate calculation, which is not related to the frontier. So I'm really struggling to see what the DEA is doing beyond what you're already doing with the initial calculation.
Okay.
And what if they are taking less than the required energy?
Yeah, perhaps maybe I'll try to what is it? Brainstorm.
So I think we're bogged down and we're puzzled. Maybe there's more discussions needed about this one.
Yes.
So who is the original author? Which paper was you following? As in, this is
UN Janicke. This one, 2020.
So they've done something similar to what you're doing, have they?
The difference is they don't have the measurement for physical activities. And so actually the underlying thesis is that it's quite expensive to capture food waste because we need data like food acquisition and food consumption. And in every country, we don't have that data. So you and Janicke try to, how if we use a yearly survey and try to model the food waste, although the result will be in terms of percentage, not the exact food waste in terms of grams or kilograms, something like that. But at least we know that which household generates more waste, something like that.
Before when I thought I understood it, now that I know I don't, I was interpreting what you were doing as, you know, when I think of a DEA, I think, oh, okay, you've got a population of usually producers, and efficiency is determined relative to the frontier, but it's frontier for that population. And it struck me that in your case, you've got a population of people, none of whom are very efficient, right?
Yes.
Judging by what you said,
Yes.
right?
No.
The general standard of performance in terms of avoiding food waste in Indonesia is very poor. So I'm still struggling to know what your DEA is doing, but with the way that the DEA usually works, I would be worried that you'd be measuring efficiency relative to a really weak standard of efficiency, rather than determining it relative to what would be achievable with some changes in cultural norms or, you know, usual behaviours or changes in regulation or something that cause people to be, as in general, to waste less food. So then when I thought I understood it in that way, I was wondering, well, okay, but what are you learning then from the DEA? So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm dominating this. I'm very puzzled about what the DEA is doing. I don't understand why you need it or what it's telling you.
Yes, so...
you don't have to answer this now.
I'll try to...
Take it as something to...
You've got 3 years to answer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I want to know your research target is people eat at home or eat outside, or you consider both?
For the study one,
Yeah.
it can be home, it can be outside. So the data is about food inputs from purchase, their own source. For example, they plant kind of rice or something like that, and also buying outside. And then we calculate at 7 days food consumption.
So, but your first study you said it's about household food waste. So your research, you need like you use household as your unit, right? But you said that the equation is like to consider individuals. So you will consider the each individuals in the household.
That's including the demographics of the household.
Yes. Okay. So we use adult meal adjusted kind of calories or energy, something like that. So still at the household level.
Yeah.
Let's say for the weight, we calculate all the weight and then adjust it into adult meal. So it's kind of common in health research.
So I just want, do you think if people just eat outside more, they will waste less? I just want to know, do you think so?
Yes, yes.
So people in Indonesia, they eat they eat more at home or outside, or what's the rate of the?
So basically, the idea is that
Yeah.
if you are full,
Yeah.
we don't want to eat more, right?
Yeah.
So if we purchase more,
Yeah.
then the rest will be uneaten food. So uneaten food here is categorized as input inefficiency, something like that.
Okay.
There are a couple of questions from online attendees. I think, Atakilki, can you summarize your questions?
I think he can give chance to the other. He can just look at my question and answer it later.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Julian?
Yes, I just had a question about the difference between packaging waste and food waste itself. Just a point of clarification. I wondered if somebody consumed a completely useless food which generates nothing at all, but didn't have any packaging waste, whether it would count as waste. I'm just thinking instant noodles in particular are a notoriously inefficient way of actually eating. And in terms of production, they consume a great deal of production, never mind the packaging, but actually in themselves, they consume a great deal of production. They don't generate much in the way of useful product at the end of it, as far as nutrition is concerned. So I'm just interested in the distinction between packaging waste, plastic and so on, and food waste in the sense of inefficient food itself, and wondered whether there was any gateway to looking at that, or whether in fact the food waste actually isn't what you're looking at. It's actually packaging waste that's being considered here.
So it's thank you very much for the question. It's different studies. The first study is about food waste. The third study is about instant noodle packaging waste.
Okay.
So
so you're looking at both.
Yeah.
But there's
different.
There's nothing here about inefficiencies pre-household consumption.
No.
So if I'm being incredibly inefficient in the production of my noodles, in terms of weight in the production process, once it's turned up in my shopping bag, that's the point you're measuring the energy content. So the inefficiency that might be happening consumer purchase is not in scope.
Yes.
Which I think might be at Julian's point, that there's a lot of activity producing noodles, and then the final product you produce isn't particularly useful.
So for the third study, we only use the package. We don't really measure the food waste from the instant noodle, only the package. So
but the point, Michael and Julian's point is that there's another problem that you're not considering, not necessarily that you have to, but just to acknowledge that there's another problem.
Yes.
Which is inefficiency in the production process, basically, up to the point of retail.
Yeah. So there are 5 stages which we don't really measure because the focus of the study is on the consumer level or household level.
Okay.
Could we look at study 3 again?
This one? Previous one? So they reported the instant noodle purchases.
So this survey that the data will come from, it's an existing survey?
Yes, existing survey.
And it measures, it actually records the waste disposal method?
Yes.
It does. It asks people about how you got rid of the plastic.
Not really the plastic, but their household waste.
In general.
We don't have, so Indonesian don't really practice the separation. So we put it in a one.
Do you think, it may not be a problem in Indonesia, but if it was in Australia, I would suspect that there could be a problem with hypothetical bias. People giving an answer to the question that seems socially acceptable, even though it might not be true. You know, I wouldn't want to think of myself as the sort of person that threw out a lot of plastic or disposed of it badly in the street or something. So I might not tell you truthfully. I might not tell the survey people truthfully that actually I just burned it. I don't dispose of it properly. Do you think that's a risk, or will people not be concerned about that?
I think it's not really the concern, because we see that it's already there are a lot of unhandled waste disposition practice in Indonesia, and the number is not really decreases from year to year. So I think the bias will not be really an issue, because a lot of people practice that.
I mean, we had a conversation about how the data is gathered, and you said that the people who are administering the survey actually check if your answers are correct.
Mm-hmm. Yes, some.
Yeah.
So it's face to face.
Yeah.
Yes, check. Let's say they have the clean water, check the water, and then how they dispose the waste, something like that.
Just in terms of the resourcing, so that means survey 1, you've got existing data, or study 1, existing data, study 3, existing data, but you're going to do study 2 yourself.
Yes.
Is that right? So you've got funding and resources that lets you, it's quite a big sample you're going to collect. You've got resources to support that one?
Yes, from the scholarship we have the funding. For the first and then third studies, my organization has a memorandum of understanding with the Indonesian statistics, so it should be 0 rupiah to obtain the data.
If I think back to when I was a child in Australia, some aspects of waste management were very poor, particularly littering was very bad. There was lots of litter by the road. And in the early 1970s, there was a very successful, very intensive public education and awareness campaign, lots of television advertisements. And they were extremely clever and extremely persuasive television advertisements. And although we still have some problem with litter, it's a tiny proportion of what it was. Like I think it's probably 10% of what it used to be. So I'm not making a question. I guess I'm sort of thinking about the fact that what's normal for a community in terms of their waste behaviour can change greatly over time, and potentially quite quickly. Like that happened in 5 years or so. That it's a very large change. So I'm wondering whether there's something in that sort of area of community education that might be. So you're doing a lot of measuring. It'd be nice to sort of take it beyond that to policy interventions. What can we do about this big problem, which we already know it's a big problem. And how can it be improved?
Yes, because the government of Indonesia focuses more on the supply side or the provisions of solid waste management, although the allocation of funds is not that big. That's why the development of the infrastructure is still very lacking.
But so with something like this study, right? You come out of a study like that, and you have a statistical relationship between bad types of disposal, and things like education, household size, ownership of the house. Then what? How does that help? Right, that's my question. What can you do with that? And it's not obvious to me what you can do with that, really.
So I guess you might be able to include a policy, a recycling possibly vignette in study 2. That might give it a slightly different angle.
Okay.
And the vignettes don't have to only be about food waste. You could possibly put something in there about disposal of plastic waste. You know, like you purchased whatever, and would you consider disposing of this packaging through a local waste facility that's collected from your house, or perhaps you have to take the plastic or the bottles to a point in the local village or local town.
Yes.
I think that points at, this is another bigger question, but what you're doing, you're shifting the problem. At the moment, the problem by plastic waste is that I've chucked it away, burnt it. If I'm a good person and hand it over and put it into the proper, it's now a big problem for the municipal authorities to actually deal with this mountain of waste that they've got to deal with. So what are they going to do? So I think the question is, what are they going to do with it if all the waste gets not burnt in your backyard but actually gets delivered properly? They've still got to do something with it. The waste still exists. So there's another, although I think you're understanding one component of fixing one part of the problem, the big picture, you're just moving it down to somebody else who's going to probably struggle to.
Yeah.
They might burn it with a chimney, though.
Yeah, they might.
That's a big advance.
Yes, that would be.
Yes, that's
you're shifting it to a different point of.
Even if they're only pretending to recycle, as we do in Australia.
Burning with a chimney might actually be a good thing if you can recover the energy and scrub the bad bits out.
Yes. That's interesting. So what I want to emphasize is related to knowledge owned by each household. So whether they know that recycling will reduce, but do they practice it? And in which areas produce more mismanaged household waste, something like that. I'll try to capture the suggestions into my project. Thank you.
You can see that we're interested. And it's a massively important problem. It's a hugely important problem, especially in Indonesia.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful general topic, and it's part of what we're trying to do is help you make it even better in the way that you tackle it.
Okay. One last question.
Is it anyway possible that there are several very effective policy management tools around the world, and just to check whether those tools or those initiatives have been integrated in the policies that is being implemented in Indonesia now, that could maybe trigger to the solution, I guess.
Okay, so basically, for the solid waste disposal collection, it's the authority of local governments, but the financial capacities from one local government to other local governments are quite huge in terms of inequality. That's the first. The second one, that's why the government of Indonesia asked the villages, let's say. So there's data showing that villages waste dispose unsustainably, something like that. That's why a village fund is used to, one of the focus is to deal with solid waste management. So that's, but I'm not really think that even when I check the budget taking of the village fund, the number of allocation for solid waste is not that much. It's only 0.5% out of 100. 100 is around 1 to 2 billion rupiah. So I think that's solid waste management is not really, they think it's not really important because maybe government can deal with that.
Okay.
Just one last comment, like in study too, I think you need like on the vignettes to include something more because maybe people's decisions are not only based on maybe the money that food will cost, more with the relationship with food. Because, for example, for me, if it's like my favorite dish, I will not throw it and save it for later. If it is something that I like a lot, or maybe if it is something that my mom has cooked at home, it's easier to save it at home than maybe if you go to a restaurant and then you need to ask for them to give you a container to take it home. So some of that different variables, I think that might be useful to include in the vignettes, like in different situations.
Okay, thank you for the suggestion. I'll try to consider that because 5 is already too much when I calculate the, what is it, it will be 32 scenarios, so I need to pick 8. The more scenarios, the more participants.
Yeah, but maybe you can include like the type of food, like if you are interested in noodles, for example, like if that food is noodles or not, for example.
Yes. Okay, I'll consider that in the model. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope all the inputs are useful and there are more work to do. Thank you again. Yeah.